Hello, hello, and welcome once again to my podcast podium. I'm so glad you've decided to spend a few moments with me today. I hope that wherever you're listening from today, you'll allow yourself to slow down for just a little while. Life has a way of keeping us in constant motion, doesn't it? We're always moving on to the next task, answering the next phone call, paying the next bill, solving the next problem. And before you know it, another week has slipped by, and somewhere in the middle of all that busyness, we've forgotten to check on the condition of our own hearts. Maybe today finds you in a good place. If so, I'm thankful for that. But perhaps you're listening because life has been feeling unusually heavy lately. Maybe you've been carrying something you haven't told anyone about. It could be the uncertainty of a medical diagnosis, the stress of trying to stretch your paycheck just a little further than it will go, or perhaps it's something no one can see at all, a quiet disappointment, a lingering grief, or maybe the weight of unanswered prayers that seem to grow heavier with every passing day. If that is where you are, I want you to know you're in good company. Not because everyone experiences the exact same circumstances, but because every one of us eventually walks through seasons that leave us feeling squeezed. That's actually what inspired today's title, The Lemon Squeezed Life. It came to me while I was making a glass of lemonade one afternoon. I picked up a lemon, sliced it in half, and as I pressed it with the juicer, I watched every drop of juice begin to flow. Almost instantly, I thought, isn't that exactly what life does to us? Okay, so a lemon doesn't release anything until pressure is applied, right? Neither do we. Pressure has a remarkable way of revealing what's hidden beneath the surface. As long as life is comfortable, it's easy to think we're patient, trusting, and full of faith. It's easy to smile when everything is going according to plan, okay? It's easy to encourage someone else when we're not the ones facing the storm. But then life changes without asking our permission. The phone rings with unexpected news. A relationship begins to unravel. The company announces layoffs, and a loved one gets sick. The diagnosis wasn't what you were hoping for. The marriage you prayed would be restored continues to struggle. Your child makes choices that keep you awake at night, or perhaps nothing dramatic happens at all. Maybe you're simply tired, bone tired. You've been carrying responsibilities for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like not to feel overwhelmed. I think those are the moments when life begins to squeeze us. And here's the interesting thing about being squeezed. Whatever has been sitting quietly inside eventually finds its way out. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's disappointment, sometimes it's worry. We may not even realize how anxious we become until something small pushes us over the edge. Suddenly, we're irritated by things that normally wouldn't bother us. We lose patience with people we love. We become discouraged over situations we once believed God would work out. I think we've all had days when we've surprised ourselves by our own reactions. We wonder, where did that come from? But perhaps the better question is, what has been building up inside of me all along? Life has a funny way of exposing the places in our hearts that still need God's healing touch. The wonderful thing about our Heavenly Father is that He isn't shocked by what He finds there. Sometimes we're afraid to come to God, honestly, because we think we need to clean ourselves up first. We imagine that prayer has to sound polished and dignified, as though we're giving a formal speech. But when I read the scriptures, I don't see that kind of relationship. I see people who came to God with tears streaming down their faces. I see men and women who asked the difficult questions. They admitted their fears. They confessed their doubts and cried out from places of deep pain. David, the king, was one of them. When we think of David, we usually picture this young shepherd boy standing courageously before Goliath with nothing but a sling and five smooth stones in his hand, right? Sure, we admire his bravery, but David's story didn't end with that giant. In fact, many of the Psalms we cherish today weren't written from moments of victory. They were written while David was hiding in caves, running for his life. He was misunderstood by people who once celebrated him and wondering when the promises of God would finally come to pass. Isn't that comforting though? The man after God's own heart wasn't always standing on mountain tops singing songs of victory. Sometimes he was lying on the cold floor of a cave, pouring out every fear and every question directly to God. That's probably why Psalm chapter 62, verse 8 speaks to me so deeply. It simply says, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our refuge. Those words are so freeing. Notice that God doesn't say, figure everything out first. He doesn't say, come back when your faith is stronger. He doesn't even say, stop crying. He simply says, pour out your heart. I love that invitation because it gives me permission to stop pretending. Let's be honest for a moment, okay? We spend a lot of time pretending, right? Someone asks, how are you doing? And without thinking, we reply, I'm fine. Sometimes fine means we're generally doing well, okay. But other times, fine is simply the shortest answer we can manage because explaining the truth feels just too exhausting. The beautiful thing is that God never settles for, I'm fine. He gently invites us to tell him what we're really carrying. Not because he doesn't already know, but because something remarkable happens when burdens move from off our shoulders into his capable hands. So Peter understood this when he wrote in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 7. He says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Now, notice he didn't say to cast some of it, not only the respectable worries, not only the spiritual concerns. He said all of it. The fear that keeps you awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, the financial pressure you've been calculating over and over, the loneliness that creeps in after everybody else has gone home, the disappointment you still haven't found words to explain, the prayer you've almost stopped praying because you're afraid to hope again. God says, give it to me. I think that's one of the hardest lessons we ever learn. Yes, we know the verse. We can quote it from memory. Yet somehow we keep picking our burdens back up again, almost as though worrying about them gives us some measure of control. But worry has never solved tomorrow's problems, it has only stolen today's peace. Jesus himself knew that, which is why he said in Matthew chapter 6, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now, I don't believe Jesus was minimizing our struggles. I think he was reminding us that grace comes one day at a time, not next month, not next year, today. Just enough grace for today's squeeze, just enough strength for today's challenge, just enough mercy for today's burdens. And perhaps that's why Lamentations tells us that God's mercies are new every morning. Isn't that great? His mercies are new every single morning. We don't have to survive tomorrow using yesterday's strength. Every sunrise is God's reminder that He has already prepared fresh mercy for whatever this day may bring. Listen, guys, maybe that's exactly what you needed to hear today. You don't have to carry the weight of next week while you're still living in today. You don't have to solve every unanswered question before the sun goes down. You don't even have to know how the story ends to trust the one who is writing it. Listen, sometimes all God asks of us is to keep taking the next faithful step, and that is enough. Guys, I thank you so much for tuning in. And I want you to know if it's something that you're going through, the lemons may still be there for a while, but so is the one who knows how to transform the bitter into something beautiful. So when life tastes hard, don't keep everything bottled inside. Pour out your heart to the one who loves you most, because the God who sees every tear also knows how to redeem every trial. Thanks again for tuning in. And if you have any comments, leave them below. I'd love to hear what you think about today's podcast. Until next time, I'll see you on my next podcast podium. Have a blessed day.